Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: The Next Generation, Genesis Force by John Vornholt. Read by Tim Russ.
The screaming, the panic, the smell of blood, those he could handle. But the tingle on his brawny neck all the way to his forehead ridges, that terrified him. As Ambassador Worf looked over his shoulder at the smoke blackening the skies, he could sense that something monstrous was rushing this way, searing across the heavens, destroying all in its path. The Klingon didn't even recall what planet he was standing on with his troop of so-called peacekeepers. There had been so many doomed worlds, and every evacuation was more difficult as word spread across the quadrant of the Genesis wave. Their rescue fleet had saved over 100,000 on this planet alone, and 100 million in total. But what was that, when billions stood to die? Less than 6 minutes remained before the destruction would overtake them. The maddened and ever-growing mob would not let any more Klingon shuttlecraft land. Their transporters were working at overcapacity, snapping people from the crowd at random.
Take me! Take me with you!
Take my child!
Nothing of his experience aboard the Enterprise had prepared him for this grim work. With bitterness in his heart, Worf concluded that it was time to cut his losses and flee. He bellowed to those who were about to die, "Batla Dakawutach! You will be remembered with honor." To his officers under his command, he shouted, "Squadron, regroup for transporter operations. Form ranks." His troopers scurried to retreat, even while they fired into the crowd to keep them at bay. Many of the doomed people were screaming to the blackened sky, begging that one of the random transporter beams take them. Worf to Mission Command. Command here. Ambassador, do you know we only have 5 minutes? Yes. Lock on to the signal of myself and the security detail. We all need to go at once, because our position will be overrun. Recall the shuttlecraft. No sooner had the words escaped from his lips than one of the shuttlecraft swooped close into the crowd, attempting to land. Someone in the mob began shooting what looked like a phaser beam into the underbelly of the shuttlecraft. The craft plunged into the shrieking crowd. Worf shouted into his comm device, "Hold that transport order. Command, lock onto the crew of the downed shuttlecraft." "Unable to, sir. There's a neutrino radiation leak. Scanner readings are unreliable. Let us proceed with your transportation at once." The mob began leaping into the flames of the wreck, and some scrambled to the top of the shuttlecraft and began to try to pry open the hatch. "Squadron, hold your fire. Follow me to the shuttlecraft and surround it. Such tug!" Worf led the charge into the crazed masses, but the huge crowd had figured out what the Klingons were doing, and it pressed forward like an octopus wrapping its tentacles around a small fish. Worf heard a mangled shout and turned to see an officer at the end of his column get swamped by a half-dozen rioters. Only turning into a berserk madman allowed him to fight his way through and reach the smoldering wreck of the shuttlecraft. Worf to Mission Command. Evacuate as many of the away team as you can, immediately. With relief, Worf saw the closest 3 of his men disappear in a sparkling mosaic of transporter molecules. "My lord, we cannot get a lock on you or anyone near the shuttlecraft because of the interference." "Evacuate our men, but keep one transporter room open for me and the survivors." "With all due respect, Ambassador, our drop-dead countdown ended 30 seconds ago. Only the flagship remains in orbit. We want you back now." "Keep taking the away team. Beam us up when we get away from the wreck. If you are not present then, I will understand." "Pulling back to maximum transporter range, with best trajectory for emergency warp escape. We will remember you with honor. End contact." Worf constantly raked the crowd with his disruptor's deadly beam. More than a few wanted to tear him apart. They blamed the Federation because Starfleet had promised more help than they could deliver. Worf didn't know who in the Federation had done all the promising to the doomed Genesis worlds, but he would look them up when this was over. Now standing atop the shuttle, Worf was bombarded by rocks and other thrown debris. His hands worked on opening the side hatch, but it only took a few seconds to realize it was jammed shut. Are you alive?
Yes. Yes.
He pulled a small explosive device from his sash, a jorwee, and set it for 5 seconds. An egg suddenly hit him on the left side of his face and dribbled down his chin, but he ignored it while he placed the charge where the impact had formed a crack in the hatch's seal. He bellowed to the survivors inside. "Get back! Explosive charge!" Worf jumped off the opposite side of the shuttlecraft. The explosion of the jorwee hurled him farther into the crowd. He fought his way back to the crushed hull of the shuttlecraft just in time to see a pilot clamber out of the smoking hatch. The pilot fired at the crowd while his comrade crawled out. The crowd was enraged at the sight of these two would-be rescuers who could still escape the horrible fate that awaited their whole planet.
Look at the sky. The sky. The sky. Look at the sky.
Look at the sky. Attention was diverted from the 3 Klingons and their wrecked vessel to the northern sky, where the gray clouds had just turned a vivid green. A flaming curtain swept over the distant mountains, throbbing and mutating as if distorted by heat. "Took!" Worf waved for his comrades to follow him as he ran from the shuttle. The 2 pilots leaped into the crowd and reached Worf just as the tingle of the transporter beam gripped his spine. Worf felt the ground trembling and saw the buildings and monorails writhe like snakes on fire. Then mercifully, his molecules disappeared from the planet just as the monstrous wall of neon fire blasted every animal, rock, and blade of grass into a churning mass of grotesque tissue. Worf and the 2 shuttle pilots collapsed onto a transporter pad in a dimly lit Klingon vessel. His first officer called him from the bridge. "Ambassador, emergency departure was successful. We are now at Warp 8, moving by the quickest route out of the path of Genesis Wave. We have refugees to deliver at Starbase 309. After that, do you have any orders?" Worf rose to his feet and shook the dirt and garbage off his uniform. He wiped the drying egg off his face, too, and it reminded him of a Terran colloquialism. Having egg on his face was fitting, because this effort had been anything but a success. Starfleet had so far failed to find the source of the wave, and it was too late for billions of souls. "I want to visit one of these wrecked planets to see the aftermath. There will be a time of reckoning." From the sunrise balcony high atop the summer palace, Overseer Tajaret gazed down upon the central courtyard of Tejmal, the capital city of Aluna. The flowering gardens and gleaming walkways were teeming with revelers and trinket vendors. Blazing silver salmon clouds silhouetted the stark spires and minarets of the city's skyline. The courtyard was lined with blue transporter booths, disgorging more pedestrians with every passing instant. No one worked more than 2 or 3 units a day. His people were joyful and at peace. In 2 days, all of that was going to end. Overseer Tajaret turned back to his quaking science advisors. "Are you sure it's coming this way?" One gray-haired eminence waved a device that created a holographic star chart on the palace floor. Slicing through this delicate starscape came an ominous shaft of darkness. It engulfed everything in its wake, and its black edge just barely grazed the blinking orb that represented Aluna. "My overseer, there can be no mistaking it. The Genesis wave will reach Aluna in 60 units, 2 dawns from today." The monarch scowled, feeling much older than his 62 cycles. "What about Starfleet? They are evacuating other planets. What about us? They promised to send the Klingon fleet. Where are they?" Overseer Tajaret rubbed his head ridges, which were distinguished by triple rows of silvery eyebrows. "I never trusted the damn Federation. This is their doing. This Genesis device is their weapon." "But, sire, not everyone must die. The trade fleet and the royal yachts have been summoned." "What is that? 10 or so ships? No doubt all of you have your seats picked out. Do any of you have a single idea what to do, beyond saving yourselves? You must summon her." The scientists looked more horrified by this proclamation than by the actual threat of the Genesis wave.
Surely, sire, you don't mean... You know who I mean. By the hand of the divine, I pray she can save us.
With that, Overseer Tajaret turned his back on his trembling advisors and once again gazed out the archway at the bustling courtyard, where unsuspecting citizens laughed and talked, so innocent and unaware of the mortal danger bearing down upon them. Professor Marla Carewe's room in the bowels of the old hospital was more like a laboratory than a prison cell, and she had access to outside communications. Through a video terminal, she avidly followed the destructive path of the Genesis wave. From a distant video feed, she witnessed an unprepossessing rock of a planet get razed by a fiery green wall of pulsating energy, turning it into a throbbing, churning mass of monstrous new life. Her guard, sitting at a small table outside the force field door, suddenly bolted to attention and listened intently to orders coming through her earpiece. "Marla, they're coming to fetch you." Soon, two pale-faced elders from the Science Council arrived at the cell door, looking grim. "Marla Carewe, Overseer Tajaret requires your immediate presence." "Skip the speeches. How much time do we have?" "A little over 60 units. Wordlessly, the three scientists climbed the stairs from the dungeon to the spotless yellow hospital lobby, where they stepped into three separate blue transporter booths. As her molecules were beamed across a relatively short distance to the Monarch's residence, the professor decided how she would save the inhabitants of Aluna, or at least a good percentage of them. When she emerged from the transporter booth in the cavernous assembly room, Carewe was met by an even larger contingent of the scientific community, most of whom despised her and her forbidden work. She addressed a young scholar who had once been her student. "Complum, you may come with me. The rest of you stay here. I know my way to the Overseer's chambers." The lad nodded and dashed after her. The royal advisors sputtered in protest, but none of them moved to stop Professor Carewe as she climbed the grand staircase to the second story of royal suites. Marla recalled the last time she had graced this palace, the day she had been condemned for heresy, plus her many private meetings with Overseer Tajaret. The monarch of Aluna stood hunch-shouldered at the archway leading to his balcony. Marla cleared her throat to draw his attention. Tajaret whirled around to find Professor Marla Carewe staring at him. He longed to rush forward and sweep her off her feet in a passionate embrace, but his regal reserve stiffened his back.
"Marla, I'm very glad you've come. I take it you've been studying the outside reports?"
She nodded. "They can't stop it. They can't even find the source. How many ships do we have?" Tajaret's shoulders slumped.
"Marla, how many ships? I can get that from these other bookworms."
"You misunderstand. The ships are only for logistical support. We can't carry millions of people in a handful of freighters, but we don't have to. We have a very mobile population and a system to move them. Why, we must have 1 million transporter booths dotting our countryside. Our transporter booths are still controlled by a complex network of geosynchronous satellites, are they not?" Tajaret was beginning to see where she was headed. The professor's aide, Complum, made rapid notes on his pad as she talked. "When the passengers are en route to their destinations, their patterns are stored in the transporter buffers on the satellites. True, it's seldom for more than an instant or two, but it could be much longer. There is a case in the Federation, a Starfleet engineer named Scott, whose pattern was frozen in a transporter buffer for 75 Terran years." The monarch's eyes widened in amazement. "Do you really think you can do that? How long can these transporter buffers last?" "We would only need a few days, I believe, until the Genesis wave passes. My Overseer, how many passengers can the transporter system move at full capacity?"
"Approximately 10% of the population."
Marla sighed. 8 million. That is the number of lives we can save, not counting those who travel on the ships. We'll have to use our vessels to tow the satellites safely out of the way, and that will be a logistical nightmare. Then she gazed around the sumptuous chamber. "But I warn you,
From what I understand, this scheme will do nothing to save our planet. Everything on Aluna will be destroyed.
Tajaret wanted to bury his face in his hands and weep, but he couldn't allow himself that indulgence.
Yes, then our world will die. But please, Marla, save as many of our species as you can. Not just our race, Overseer. We'll need lots of plants and animal samples in order to reseed the planet. We'll come back stronger than ever. Ahem.
It was the young scholar, Complum, who addressed Marla. Professor Carew, may I remind you that the satellite computers are living biological components, the bio-neural network. I don't think we can expect all those transporter patterns to last an indefinite time.
No, but the biological components make rapid expansion and scaling possible.
Marla turned to Tajaret and crossed her arms.
So, how many ships do we have? 11 full-sized vessels, a dozen shuttles and ketches. You must grant me a pardon and put me in command of all ships. Better yet, make me a regent, and do it now, unless you prefer to be the ruler of nothing.
Tajaret's lips thinned, and his hands twitched, but the Overseer nodded his acquiescence. If Marla Carew could not drive this desperate rescue effort to success, then no one could. Suddenly, the side door banged open, and Tajaret's wife came storming into the reception room. She was in a white morning gown, fresh from her trip to the sanctuary that sunrise. Genosette stared in disbelief at her husband.
What is this I hear?
When her eyes lit upon Marla, Seeress Genosette exploded.
What is she doing here? I'll call the guards.
Tajaret stamped his foot at the fair-haired beauty who was his spouse.
No! She is here to save our world. I've just made her regent.
Seeress Genosette looked at him in astonishment.
You appoint the biggest blasphemer on Aluna as our regent? Do you want the people to overthrow you? My dear, they'll all be dead before they could do anything. The Genesis wave is headed for Aluna, and we're going to perform miracles just to save 10% of the population.
His wife almost jumped across his desk to get him.
You fool! You've lost the kingdom! Half true, my dear. I have both lost and saved it.
In the morning shadows of the immense summer palace, Farlow Fuzwick dashed through the crowd of merrymakers with his best friend Condra, chasing him at full speed. Their playful game of tag had a purpose, because they often bumped into someone with a bead sack. When they could easily snatch the prize and keep running, they did. The stiff petticoat breeches and tunics were their rich clothes, the ones they wore to cavort with polite society and look as if they fit in. Or at least look as if they had parents. Farlow dashed behind a column on the shadowy side of a palisade and paused to inspect the 2 bead sacks he had swiped. Condra tried to snatch them from Farlow, but he held them tightly. A cycle ago, Condra would have easily taken the bead sacks, but the 13-cycle-old youth had grown in stature and muscle since those days. Condra, too, was becoming a woman, and no doubt she would soon have to ply the pleasure trade down on the Esplanade level. For those of low breed, there weren't a lot of opportunities. Condra pestered him until he opened the bright purple and gold-striped bag. Farlow rummaged through the meager takings. 6 garnet beads, a sea worm pin, and a transit pass to Stone Spire. That's worth something. It was only worth something because the Bureau of Culture limited the number of visitors to the historic site. Condra held out her hand. I'll take the sea worm pin. Farlow always gave the girly things to her. So he handed over the pin, which she promptly stuck behind her lapel, out of sight. The second bag was smaller, black, and frayed, and Farlow didn't hold much hope for it containing great riches. He removed a watch bug and a round crystal, 3 aquamarines, a garnet, plus a curious ebony cylinder which looked like a very expensive pillbox. Condra instantly reached for it, but he dropped the goods in his puffy, laced shirt. You got yours, Condra. That pin's worth more than all the others combined. Do you want to knock off or try for more? Condra spun about as if imitating a dancer.
Her red hair flowed behind her. "Why don't we go see the Wish Man? New clothes, I fancy. Something which shows a little skin." Farlow scowled. "Listen, you've got to keep dressing like a child. If you start to draw too much attention, we'll never be able to run our scams." "Come on, Farlow, the Wish Man." He giggled at Condra and sprinted between two food tents into a side street. He might be able to lose her if he tried hard enough. It didn't really matter because they both knew their way to the Wish Man, and it was probably best if they didn't travel together. At a trash disintegrator, Farlow got rid of the bead sacks. Then he jogged down an insignificant side street, keeping a lead on Condra. For some reason, the loot in his shirt felt ponderous and bulky. He knew of a decent hiding place under a local transporter booth where there was a loose brick. Then he could use the same machine to get to his destination. Not long after, Farlow crouched down behind a blue booth and hurriedly removed a loose brick. Keeping the beads for expense money, Farlow squirreled away the transit pass to Stone Spire, the watch bug, and the ebony cylinder. But he couldn't leave the cylinder alone. He had to pick it up for one last look. When he did, he must have triggered something. As a whiff of perfume shot him in the nostrils, the boy almost sneezed, but he managed to grip his nose in time. He quickly buried the cylinder as he intended and replaced the brick. Then he slipped into the transporter booth. "Watermill Station, level 4.
Transporting.
Farlow felt a rush down his spine as his body was reassembled in a dingy transporter booth in the underground complex that supported the capital's main water treatment plant. In this massive cavern there was a square. It was gray and dark. Although there were shops and offices on this level, most were closed. Farlow stepped away from the transit booth and looked around for his friend Condra, not seeing her. He was still alone when he reached a small store with a blazing sign that read, "Wishes." Dusty electronics, hand tools, artist supplies, and musical instruments were hanging in the dirty display window. Behind a counter stood a white-haired man with 6 white-haired eyebrows, 3 of which he raised when he saw Farlow enter his establishment. "Shh!" The old man put his fingers to his lips as he slipped past the boy, shut the door, and locked it. "Okay, boy. What have you got for me?" The lad shrugged and looked out the window. "I don't really have much. It's Condra who has everything." The rap on the door made both of them jump. They whirled around to see Condra. Farlow unlocked the door while the proprietor scouted the walkway. After ducking inside, Condra hid behind a bass drum in the corner of the window. "I think I lost them." The Wish Man looked worried. "Lost who?" "Oh, some spoilers." The Wish Man made a sign to the sky. "May the divine hand move to protect us." Condra moved closer to the old shopkeeper. "What do you make of this?" She turned back the lapel of her stiff white jacket and showed him the exquisite sea-worm pin. The shopkeeper squinted at the prize. "Oh, I've never seen one like that. You must get out of here with it." He pushed them both toward the door and yanked it open just as 2 broad-shouldered constables muscled their way into the store. He shoved Condra toward the officers. "Here she is. We only deal in legally processed estates." They grabbed Condra by her arms and she struggled futilely. When the male officer jabbed her with his stun stick, she collapsed to the threadbare carpet as Farlow rushed to catch her. "What is this about? We're just down here looking for our parents." The constable reached down and pulled the pretty sea-worm pin off Condra's lapel. "This is a tracer carried by one of our officers to catch thieves. This time you've been nabbed, and no parent would claim a low breed like you." Farlow leaped to his feet and shoved the officer out of the way. He made a break for the open door and almost got out before the other constable swung his stun stick and caught the escaping lad on the elbow. "Ah!" His vision bleary and his head throbbing, Farlow woke up in a prison laboratory with his arms, legs, and torso strapped firmly to a bed. "Help! Get me out of here! I'm innocent!" "It won't do you any good, Farlow." He turned to see Condra strapped to a similar bed. "I've been yelling for 10 minutes, and nobody's come in. Plus, they did something to us." What do you mean? I was waking up when they finished. They pumped us full of something.
A handsome, white-gowned man entered the cell.
No, we merely took a DNA sample. Standard procedure.
He strolled between the two bound prisoners and stopped to look at the girl. Chandra, I'm letting you go, to be remanded to the Bureau of Pleasure, where I believe they'll find some use for your light-fingered touch. He pushed a button on her bed, and a blue shroud floated down from the ceiling. As soon as she was completely covered, the shroud blazed with an eerie green. As the transporter beam spirited her away, Farlow fought back his tears and looked at the man.
Will I ever see her again? I sincerely doubt it. You are to have an altogether different destiny, Farlow Fuzwick. I am the seeress consort, Padrin.
Farlow knew that meant the man was married to their queen. In breeding, he was the second most important male on the planet, the one who was supposed to guarantee the purity of the royal bloodlines if the overseer failed to produce offspring. Farlow had never seen a royal personage, except at great distance, during a public ceremony.
What do you want with me?
Padrin smiled.
Has no one ever done a DNA test on you before? Your breeding is a 96% match to the chromosome particles of suzerainty. Your breeding is better than mine, and the equal of the overseer's. For 10 cycles I have searched for such a match. An army of field agents failed to find you because you were too busy stealing bead sacks and evading the law. My boy, you are the law.
The man freed Farlow, who slipped out of bed to stand uncertainly on the floor.
Are you saying I could become overseer?
It's not that simple, but your offspring stand a good chance.
How could someone like me be a hybrid?
Well, maybe you're a mutant. Just a rare stroke of dumb luck from the right parents. Padrin here.
Sir, the seeress is here to see you.
Send her in, of course. Padrin then winked at Farlow. Just let me talk, unless Geneset speaks to you. A stunning blonde woman of uncertain age came into the examination room. Padrin leaped forward to take her hand.
Darling, I'm glad you got my message and came so quickly.
The seeress snatched her hand back.
I have no idea what you're talking about. We have an emergency.
Padrin grabbed Farlow by his skinny shoulders and hauled him forward.
Can't we have good news first? He's a 96% match. We've finally succeeded.
Her jaw dropped open and her shoulders slumped. Then she awarded Farlow a glance. Perhaps the timing of this is beneficial, because we will need all the pull we've got to hold on to this kingdom and turn it into a queendom.
Do you follow Federation reports at all? Do you know about the Genesis wave?
Padrin seemed to pale and shrink from her.
Yes, a little. We're not endangered, are we? We're doomed. The whole planet. Tajaret has gone and appointed Marla Carew as regent, because she has some notion of saving the people in transporter pattern buffers. But after this crisis, we must return to power.
Padrin slumped onto the bed.
Will we even be alive?
Geneset crossed her arms, and her auburn eyebrows fairly danced across her delicate forehead.
Yes, that is another concern. How to control the evacuation. I can't imagine that we won't protect the high-blooded first, but who can say? That blasphemer is in charge of this whole thing.
She glanced again at Farlow, and her expression softened.
If I can produce an offspring of higher blood than Tajaret's, then we can unseat him and reclaim the throne. Padrin, prepare this boy for our wedding at midday.
From a cylindrical room on an orbital space station, Professor Marla Carew gazed out the viewport at the dazzling blue-green planet below, the ill-fated Aluna. The planet was in pristine condition, owing to their determined policy of low pollution and low population. Marrying 3 or 4 men to each woman had effectively solved the population problem eons ago, and new testing procedures had allowed the bloodlines to be categorized and standardized to a degree that was unheard of. Breed casting was exactly the type of thing that Marla had rebelled against. A corrupt culture and backwater pedantry were the very worst features of Aluna, yet they would survive after everything else was gone. It's Complum, Your Regency. The Energy Lab is ready to try their first test of the gel plasma power cells to replace the solar receptors on the satellites. Complum, you must make it clear to everyone that we can't lose power to these satellites. That's the same as murder. Yes, Your Regency. And I believe you have a visitor. Curate Molovzon. He seems to be in the custody of 2 constables. Marla smiled to herself. It happens to the best of us. Will you please have his escorts bring him in? 2 beefy constables pushed a struggling, wizened old man in scarlet robes into her engineering sanctum.
Marla Carew, you foul beast.
That's enough. You'll be quiet, or I'll have them push you out an airlock.
You can't do that.
Oh, yes, I can. I'm Regent of Aluna.
You're on a mad power rampage.
Marla shook her head in disbelief. I wish it was that simple. You must know by now the Genesis wave is headed our way. He nodded somberly.
Yes, we are praying that it will be averted.
Curate Molovzon, whether you like it or not, this planet is going to be altered beyond recognition in 57 units. I intend to save several million Alunans in the buffers of our satellites, but I don't know how to be divine and choose who lives or dies. I was hoping you would help me. Molovzon shrugged his bony shoulders.
I suppose we will take the highborn first.
Marla turned away from him and gazed out the viewport. Do we really want a world in which everyone is basically brother and sister? Just think about what we need to survive after our civilization is gone. How many hybrids are carpenters, masons, farmers, and garbage collectors? Not very many. The curate fingered his satin robe.
You will take all the clergy, won't you?
Her brow furrowed in thought. After I see the numbers you send me, I'll see what I can do. The old clergyman rubbed his cracked lips.
I suppose you could ask for volunteers. Older ones who have lived most of their lives and will make way for younger people.
Yes, that's the kind of insight I was hoping for. The Overseer is due to address the populace in about a unit. Why don't you beam directly to the Summer Palace, and you can be at his side. When he's done, you make your appeal for volunteers. It will mean so much coming from you, Curate. After the Curate left, Complum interrupted Marla again. Regent, the Royal Biology Institute has responded to your request. At the crux is one main question. How many people do we leave behind in order to take plants and animals? Carew took a deep breath and a long pause before replying. We'll take the minimum needed for reproduction, favoring successful species over extremely rare ones. What we need is a terraforming device that we can use to counter the effects of the Genesis wave. What about the chromosynthesis process? Your Regency, chromosynthesis is only in its infancy. It has never been tested. What a perfect time for it, Complum. We just have to bring all the pertinent data and hardware. For now, let's restrict this idea to a small number of people. Yes, Your Regency. And there are several other urgent matters, like the commanders of the merchant fleet and the royal yachts. They've been awaiting word from you, and they're none too happy. I'll send them a memo apologizing for the delay. But they don't need me to report information on their tractor beams, tether lines, and power output. If they would just fill out my questionnaire, we could get somewhere. Yes, Regent. Long-necked yellow birds floated across the shimmering mirror of water. Farlow had visited the inlets of the calm ocean once before, but he hadn't been lounging in a recliner, enjoying a cool drink of nectar. It was the Institute of Devotion, and he and Padron had arrived in a red transporter booth, which meant travel here was restricted. The idea of marriage to Cirrus Geneset was so wild that Farlow couldn't believe they would go through with it. His uncle Padron, as he had taken to calling the Cirrus consort, sat in a chair not far away. Farlow bit his lower lip, wondering if he could be blunt with his new uncle. Uncle Padron, if it's my wedding,
Why can't I have at least one friend there? Can I invite my friend Chandra? Padrin tapped the panel on his chair. This is Consort Padrin. Give me the Esplanade Command Center. Farlow listened intently as Padrin issued orders to have Chandra brought to the Institute of Devotion. Farlow figured he and his well-born new family would be saved from this Genesis wave, and he wanted to make sure Chandra was also safe. Marla Carew stood in the holodeck room of the Summer Palace. She nodded to Complom, and he started the program. The room began to fill with the lifelike visages of 9 starship captains. It was a rarefied job on Aluna, befitting high breed and considerable off-world training on places like Earth and Vulcan. Marla began with a smile. Hello, captains. I don't begrudge you looking askance at me because I've kept you waiting. By now you've read the reports. Our world and most of the people who live here are going to perish. But we have a chance to save 8 million citizens, plus animals and plants and unique species. Marla took a moment to encapsulate what they already should have known about the Genesis wave. Then she went on. You, Aluna's fleet, must tow 300,000 satellites out of harm's way. Then we can return, resurrect our populace, and reclaim our world from this diabolical event. We have less than 2 days, about 44 units to escape. There are 2 components to what you have to do. One is to supply energy to the satellites, to keep their computers and buffers at full, and the other is to tow as many as you can to safety. One of the captains addressed them. And why can't the Federation help us? I have asked them for help, and so has Overseer Tajaret before me. But we haven't been given much hope. Their fleets are spread out all along the path of the wave, and most of their ships are already full of refugees or simply can't get here in time. Another captain shook his head. Incredible. Our entire civilization comes down to our handful of ships and this insane idea. Our families, will they be saved? Carew pursed her lips, trying not to show any emotion, even though this issue nagged her every waking instant. She nodded. Yes, your families and those of your crews will be on the exempt list. Good day, my comrades, and the speed of the divine hand be with you. She motioned to Complom to end the holodeck conference. As the images of the stiff-necked captains gradually faded away, Marla turned to her assistant. What have we heard about the battery tests? Complom checked the notes on his handheld pad. So far, so good. Still full power in the satellite systems. No biodegradation. Marla strode past him toward the door. I'm giving orders to proceed to full installation right now. Get a repair crew and tons of supplies onto every orbiter. What do you think the common people will do when we turn off the transporter system? Complom looked alarmed. Panic! Riot! Don't do it without warning, please. The Regent scowled. All right. We'll give them 2 units to get home. But we'll suggest they don't go anywhere unless it's an emergency. Complom sighed. In these times, every breath is an emergency. You're right on that, Complom. And it's only going to get worse. At the Institute of Devotion, Farlow Fuzwick rushed down the tile walkway to the restricted red transporter booth. Chandra! His old partner in crime looked remarkably like a woman, dressed in a diaphanous blue gown and wobbling on high heels. She staggered off the transporter platform into his arms. Farlow pulled away, slightly embarrassed. You look grown up. It's great that you made it. I didn't think you would. What was it like on the Esplanade? Really fun. It was a very high-class place from what I could tell. But then came the Overseer's announcement about the Genesis wave, and the customers all ran for home. Then the constables showed up, and here I am. But what happened to you? I'm getting married to the Seeress, to be your 3rd husband, because it turns out I've got high breeding. Chandra gripped his arm. You're not making this up. He pointed to his elegant clothing, and then at the sumptuous grounds. Farlow, this means you're going to get off the planet before the energy wave hits us. But what about me? Stick close to me, Condra. Maybe I'll have some pull with the Overseer. Farlow and Condra stayed in the garden, talking until Uncle Padron came to fetch them. The ceremony lasted for more than a unit of time. The seeress had brought both a judge and a cleric with her, and they were surrounded by servants, minor dignitaries, and the acolytes of the Institute of Devotion. Farlow fretted all through the ceremonies about what his post-nuptial duties would be. And he kept scanning the crowd for Condra to make sure she was sticking by him, but as the ceremonies dragged on, he lost sight of her. When it was over, and every power on Aluna had pronounced them husband and wife, Farlow continued to survey the crowd, looking for his friend. He didn't know why, but her friendship seemed more important than anything else at the moment. Condra hesitated before following the last of the resplendent wedding guests into the red transporter booth. She wondered how she could leave her best friend when he wanted her to be here. The answer was clear on the face of Seeress Genoset. The lady had high plans for Farlow, and they didn't include his ragamuffin friends. A kindly male voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, may I ask you something?" She turned around to see a great rarity, an off-worlder, dressed in simple but flowing brown robes, as if he were one of the acolytes. Dark, gleaming hair, pointy ears, and only one pair of eyebrows. What were they called? Romulans? Rigelians? Klingons? Whatever he was, Condra knew what all off-worlders wanted. "You can take this red transporter booth any place that's not restricted." "I know that, but I am looking for an object I lost, and there is a reward for the one who finds it. I have my own starship, and I can offer you a coveted prize. Escape from this doomed world." "What makes you think I know where it is?" "Because you stole it. Do you remember a black bead sack which you took this morning from a passer-by in the courtyard of the Summer Palace?" Condra glanced at the transporter booth, wondering if she could make a break for it. But the stranger stepped in front of her. "My friend was careless. I offer no punishment, just rewards. The only thing I want from the bag is a black tube-like device about so long. Do you remember it?" "Maybe." Since Farlow had taken all the belongings in the black bag, she didn't really know what had become of them. But Farlow ought to know. The off-worlder showed her a small communications device. "If you find it, you press this button to contact me." He pinned it on her gown like a brooch. Then the stranger walked toward the transporter booth. "I hope to hear from you, Condra." "Condra!" She heard a call and looked up to see Farlow running her way. Things were happening so fast, but she knew that the mysterious off-worlder had been right about one thing. She needed to look out for her own skin. Four constables wielding stun sticks tightened ranks around the blue transporter booth, but they were outnumbered by the mob by about 100 to 1. Despite repeated announcements that the transporter system would shut down at mid-afternoon, millions of Alunans had been caught in places far from home. The mob assaulted the transporter booth, managed to uproot the box and push it over onto its side. Marla scowled and tried to look away, but the chief constable turned up the sound and made the image on the overseer's desk even larger.
According to your orders, we have to protect each and every transporter booth at all cost. Is that right, Your Regency?
That's right. Every booth is crucial.
Regent, we've got to have more constables. Now, we can hire all we want just by putting them on the list to be saved.
Marla shook her head sullenly. "So, the only people who will be saved are the thugs we hired to protect the transporter booths?" The chief shrugged.
My forces didn't choose this battle. So can we promise salvation to our new hires?
"Yes." After he hurried from the receiving room, Marla rubbed her rows of graying eyebrows. Every single inhabitant of Eluna, including every plant and animal, deserved to live. Nothing about this outcome was fair. That reminded her of another task, to check in with the Biology Institute. Regent Marla Carew wishes to contact the Chief Administrator, Dr. Harlem Haskin, Institute of Biology. Regent, I am at your service. We have all the samples, or access to them. Marla nodded. We need to get the slower ships sent off as soon as possible, with easily assembled loads. Right after your menagerie are the royalty. We're also thinking about doing some terraforming when we get back. Doctor, what do you know about the process called chromosynthesis? Well, it's a way to synthesize the existence of an animal or plant down to their genetic imprinting, using standard components and cell data. A lot of raw material is required, which makes it impractical. You also know such research is illegal. I suspected as much. However, there is one man, and they say he sometimes traffics with off-worlders to obtain equipment and information. Vilo Garlett is the leading authority who's not in prison, but you didn't hear that from me. I'd like to talk more, but I've got to plan for my passing. I'm 87 cycles old, and my wife isn't well. I'll stay behind with her. You're a hero in many ways, Doctor. Marla tapped another panel on the desk. Personal records.
Yes. Please state the name or search term.
Vilo Garlett, formerly of the Science Council. I want an address for him. Sunset dropped like a blazing neon curtain over the inlet of the calm ocean, and Farlow and Condra stopped upon a garden path to admire the brilliant hue, reflected in the smooth azure sea. Suddenly, Condra broke their silence. Hey, do you remember the loot you stole in the park this morning? What did you do with it? Buried it? Well, when I was at the Esplanade, I found out that those black things, that little tube, they're valuable. We should go get that thing. He shrugged. It was just a perfume, mister. I tried it. Well, it's a valuable perfume, mister. You hid it by the apothecary, didn't you? Farlow looked at her curiously. So what if I did? Why should I tell you? You can't get there anyway. The transporters are closed, so they can get ready to grab all of our molecules and keep us in cold storage. Hey, let's go over to the transporter to make sure. Come on, Farlow, I'll race you. She kicked off her fancy shoes and ran full speed down the path toward the red booth. When she ducked into the booth, he followed her. Computer, take us to the Bluebird Apothecary in Tejmal. Farlow gripped Condra's arm. But we can't leave! It was too late. They were gone, reconstituted on a side street in Eluna's capital city. Laughing, Condra pushed him out the door right into the brawny arms of a constable who grabbed Farlow. Hey, you! Don't you know that travel is restricted? The lad looked around at 4 other constables and a number of onlookers milling around the closed storefronts.
Hey, I thought the transporters were shut down.
Hey, everyone look, this transporter's running. We can get home.
The constables were quickly overwhelmed and knocked down by people rushing the transporter booth. Farlow caught up with Condra behind the booth where she was digging in his secret hole. She grinned happily at him as she retrieved the small black tube, the transporter pass, and the crystal timepiece he had stashed there that morning. I've saved our lives, Farlow. Then she grabbed his hand, and they dashed down a deserted street. Marla Carew looked up at the flickering electric sign over the warehouse door. Waving their stun sticks, constables crowded around her, prepared to conduct her into the darkened building. No, I'll go alone. As she pushed open the metal door, the odor of old solvents assaulted her nose, and she saw nothing but darkness. Using a small torch, she cautiously entered a large warehouse space that was empty, except for some huge packing crates in the far corner. Vilo Garlett, this is Marla Carew, and I'm Regent now. I want to save your life. I need you to help me. I'm not afraid of you, Marla. I'm gladdened that they had the sense to put you in charge. But I don't trust you any more than I trust the Overseer. Up above, she saw a slim figure moving on a catwalk against the far wall. Vilo, don't you want to leave before the wave comes? Oh, I'm leaving. Very soon. Which is why I haven't got time for you. The Regent stopped in her tracks and turned off her light. I want to appeal to your reason. If you can help me use chromosynthesis, we may have a way to reseed this planet in much greater time than normal. I've only made one chromosynthetic device that's worth anything, and it was built for a very specific purpose. But it's been lost. Just when I was about to change this planet for the better, along comes this energy wave to completely wipe us out. Ironic, eh? This doesn't have to be the end of Aluna. Help me, please. If I can, I'll return to Aluna afterward and help you. But I can't risk discovery now. Goodbye, Marla. Then he vanished into the shadows. But how was Vilo Garlet going to leave the planet, she wondered, unless he had a ship? She wouldn't put it past him because he had often associated with off-worlders. Regent Carew to team leader. There's no one here, so I'm coming out. Tell the ship to prepare to beam us up. Most of the roofs in Tejmal were sloped or domed, like minarets, but a few had niches and cornices where two lithe young people could climb and hide, observing the city below them. So it was that Farlow and Condra perched on the roof of an art gallery in the old section of town. In the starlit sky, a shuttlecraft glided slowly past their position, then wound through the sky over the summer palace. Farlow looked at Condra sadly. We're going to die here. Condra smiled. I wasn't going to tell you, but maybe I should because you look so miserable. I know an off-worlder who's going to take us with him. He wants your perfume sprayer. That's why we had to get it. You've gone crazy. We were already safe, and now we're stranded. All to get that perfume. I'll prove it to you, Farlow. She showed him a pin she wore on her dress. This is a communicator. All I have to do is push it, and my pointy-eared friend will answer. Smugly, the girl tapped the brooch and grinned. Absolutely nothing happened. After Farlow began to laugh at her futile attempts, she tore off the jewelry and was about to hurl it 20 stories into the street below, but he caught her hand. No, wait. Don't turn up your nose at a gift. Let's keep that pin and see if it's at all useful in the morning. We'll keep the perfume, too. You never know. We may want to smell good when we die. The important thing is that we stick with each other and not give up. From the cockpit of his runabout, the Klamath, the pointy-eared alien looked back at the sleeping Alunan in the passenger seat. He wanted to make sure that Vilo Garlet was asleep before he broke security and made contact with his superior. Using a special encrypted subspace band, the pilot opened a direct channel. Specialist Regimal on Starship Vessel Klamath to Admiral Nechayev, access code Bacchus Aurora 13, urgent protocol. When finally his instrument panel beeped, he leaned forward to make contact. Only it wasn't the Admiral on the screen. It was her taciturn Andorian aide, Commander Dakjalu. Sorry, but Admiral Nechayev is in the field and is indisposed. She's on the planet Myrmidon with members of the Enterprise crew, seeing if the interphase generators work during exposure to Genesis. Regimal was surprised. An interphase generator is fine for walking through walls, but for saving a planet? Commander Dakjalu interrupted. But the Admiral did leave orders for you. You are to report to Deep Space Nine and await further orders. The renegade Romulan scowled. What about my passenger and the mission I'm already on? Since Aluna has been determined to be in the path of the Genesis wave, we no longer suspect that rebels on Aluna are involved in creating it. I will inform the Admiral that you made contact. Starfleet out.
Regimal plied his controls and brought the runabout out of warp drive.
Stupid bureaucrats. Worse than the Romulan Senate. Velo, wake up. We're headed back to Aluna. Huh? Are you crazy? We'll barely get back before the wave hits. And they're already looking for us. Then it's only fair to let them find us.
By midday, both Farlow and Condra realized that they had better get registered for the lottery that would determine which citizens would be saved in the transporter buffers of the satellites. The official in the temporary kiosk explained how it worked. We're taking retina scans and matching them to a microscopic homing device, which I'll implant under your skin. If the homing device beeps and lights up, you've been selected. So, look into this eyepiece with your right eye. As Farlow obeyed, the official jabbed Farlow in the left forearm with a hypospray, implanting a small tracking device just under his skin. Condra stepped forward and completed the same procedure. Soon, the two youths shuffled away, not knowing what to say to each other. It was hard to be enthusiastic about being frozen in a pattern buffer for an indefinite time, no matter what the alternative was. She lowered her head.
Farlow, you should be going with the Cirrus. I'm sorry I screwed up.
Don't worry about it. Farlow was mustering more bravado than he felt. His mind was whirring, trying to figure out how to beat the odds and return and find protection with the Cirrus, or Uncle Padre if need be. If we could only find a working transporter to get back to the Institute of Devotion, we'd be all right. Condra stopped and looked at him.
We came through a red one, so maybe the red ones...
Yes, Condra. We'll find another restricted booth. He held up his transporter ticket for the stone spire.
There's one here. All we have to do is walk there.
Marla Carew tapped her chin thoughtfully when she read the dispatch from the test satellite. She had been watching for degradation in the system while it ran under the plasma gel packs, and she thought they would be home free. But they weren't. A small glitch had occurred after a full night and part of a day of running on the emergency power. She filed the log on the computer of the royal yacht, Darzor. On the other side of the bulkhead, kicking up a fuss, was Curate Molovzon.
Complom, send Curate Molovzon in and send the constables with him.
As the door slid open, the wizened clergyman strode into the room, fire burning in his eyes.
You promised me. You said you would take all of my clergy and acolytes. I never said that, Curate. I automatically took all of the clergy who are under 30 and put all the others in the lottery. So many more will be saved. I'll fight you. I'll rally the masses against you.
He rushed her and actually had his hands around her neck when the two constables moved in to restrain him. One of them used his stun stick and dropped the maddened clergyman into unconsciousness. Marla Carew felt her jaw tightening.
Throw him out an airlock.
The constables stared at the regent as if they hadn't heard her correctly. The younger officer gasped.
But that would be murder!
Marla scowled as she circled her desk to face them.
I've already committed murder 70 million times today. My hands are drenched in blood. If the two of you won't throw him out an airlock, I'll take your names off the list and find 2 people who will. Do it quickly, and don't tell anybody, not even my staff or your superiors. We'll let history decide if we're villains or heroes. You're dismissed.
After a glance at each other to fortify their courage, the constables holstered their stun sticks and picked up the unconscious curate. Despite the logic and pragmatism of her decision, the regent sat at her desk, buried her face in her hands, and began to weep. After walking all afternoon until the early dusk, Farlow and Condra finally reached the stone spire. Eons ago, this crude minaret of bricks and mortar had noted the first incursion of the divine hand into this region, which had been held by pagans. But arriving at the ruin and seeing the crowds, Farlow realized they had made a mistake. He gripped Condra's hand. "Come on. I know another way in. The orphanage brought us here once. They took us in a back way." The stone passageway, built during the Dark Ages, was so low, stooped, and dank that nobody wanted to be in there. The metal spiked gate at the far end was unguarded, with just enough space between the top of the spikes and the ceiling of the passageway for them to slip over. But inside the walls of the stone spire, a red transporter booth was nowhere in sight. Condra whispered to Farlow, "Once they start beaming people up, we'll never get inside a transporter." Farlow tried to reassure her. "Let's just march around until we find it. Keep close to me." Within the narrow walkways of the old fortress, they avoided being seen, and their luck lasted until they reached the courtyard and saw a red transporter booth which no one was watching or guarding. The two young people dashed straight into the enclosure and heaved sighs of relief. "Institute of Devotion, please." Nothing whatsoever happened. The booth acted as if it were turned off. "Okay, now what, Farlow?" "Condra, unless you have a better idea, we wait. Nobody can see us while we're in here." Suddenly, a familiar voice boomed from the speakers in the courtyard. It was Overseer Tajaret.
"Citizens of Aluna, I thank you for your patience and understanding. The results of the lottery are complete, and those of you who are leaving with us have been chosen. In a few instants, your implants will activate if you have been so chosen, and you should report immediately to the nearest transporter booth."
Farlow held his breath and looked at his arm. A moment later, there was a dull red glow under his skin. With a grin, he looked excitedly at Condra, who shook her head glumly because there was no change in the bump on her arm. "Condra, you'll go. We'll find a way." "No, you were meant to go." With that, she dashed from the booth, leaving Farlow stunned. He started to go after her, but the transporter booth suddenly activated with a rash of lights.
Prepare to transport.
Before Farlow could even gasp, he began to dematerialize, and his body was whisked away into the unknown. Padrin pulled Farlow Fuzwick out of the red transporter booth and gave him a crushing hug. "Wonderful! You made it! I thought we had lost you forever." Dazed, Farlow looked around and found himself back in the beautifully kept gardens of the Institute of Devotion. Cirrus Geneset smiled smugly. "It was dumb of you to run away. But at least you had the brains to register for the lottery. That's how we found you. Padrin, get him cleaned up a bit, in new clothes, and then meet me at my shuttlecraft." Padrin gripped the boy's arm and dragged him toward the Institute. "You're the luckiest boy on the whole damn planet, and you almost threw it away." Farlow sniffed back tears, thinking that he didn't feel like the luckiest boy when he had just lost Condra, his best friend. Marla Carew was in the library of the Royal Yacht Darzor, studying a bank of status monitors connected to the satellites, the transporters, and the vessels under her command. The chief constable was reporting to her over her comlink. "Evacuation proceeding as planned."
Chief, when do we estimate we'll be done with the evacuation?
3 units for the upload, and the satellites are already tethered. We'll be on schedule.
Thank you, Chief.
She punched the off switch on that view screen and turned back to the others. The last starship and the last satellite had to depart before midnight. Nothing could stand in the way of that goal. As darkness dropped decisively over the calm ocean, the shuttlecraft lifted from the landing pad. Still sniffing back tears, Farlow gazed out the viewport. He had never flown anywhere,
but this unique experience was muted by his sorrow. His world, his friends, his haunts, this was the last time he would ever see any of them. The lad heard another sniffle, and he turned to see Seeress Geneset staring out the viewport on the other side of the aisle. She shook her head. "What a waste! Now life will be a battle." Uncle Padron tried to comfort her. "At least you're alive, my dear." Why couldn't Chandra be with them? Farlow wondered glumly. There was no answer. No answer at all. Just the soft hum of the shuttlecraft's impulse engines fleeing from the ill-fated planet. Overseer Tajaret looked 15 cycles older than he had before freeing Marla Carew from arrest and inviting her to his chambers. Now the Regent had summoned the Overseer to her chambers on the Darzor. On her view screen, they had both watched the final gathering of the satellites by the fastest of the yachts, the Darzor herself. Now they were finally underway. "How did you do it, Marla? How did you choose who would go?" "We never announced it officially, but half the lottery selection were children. Other choices were made for me by circumstances, such as bringing so many constables." "I could quibble with you, Marla, but I could not have done what you did." She smiled wanly. "To tell you the truth, I feel more like a mass murderer than a savior." "So do I. But what else could we do?" "We are not saved yet, Overseer. But thus far, everything has gone remarkably well. I'm sure there will come a time when you can reclaim your throne." Tajaret shook his head gently. "I doubt it. You have no intentions of ever returning power to me and the monarchy. You've always hated the hereditary system. Here you've struggled for decades to revolutionize our society, and an outside force has done it for you." Marla was speechless for the moment, unsure whether he was complaining or stating the simple truth. This was a man she had once loved, despite their differences, so she found it hard to hate him, even if she hated what he represented. "Marla, I don't wish to stand in your way. Just don't give me reason to oppose you." The Overseer shuffled toward the door, stopped, and looked back. "You will keep the ones in the satellites alive, won't you?" "I'm trying my best, Overseer." Left alone, underway on their journey, and with no immediate concerns, Marla curled up on the couch in the library and was asleep in less than a heartbeat. What seemed like a moment later, someone shook her shoulder. "Regent Carew, please wake up." It was her young assistant, Complum. From his grim expression, she knew that he hadn't woken her for a trivial reason. "Regent, they need you on the bridge. Captain Uzel says it's urgent." Without even wiping the sleepiness from her eyes, Carew charged out of the library, down the corridor, and onto the sumptuous bridge of the yacht. "What is it, Captain?" "The main impulse engine is failing. We didn't anticipate the drain on the reactor to maintain the tractor beam and power the satellites." Marla sighed in disgust. "How fast are we going?" "We're at a dead stop. This was the only way to recharge the deuterium tanks." She leaned over the shoulder of the con officer. "How close are we to the safety zone?" "Still 2 units of travel time, and that is approximately when the Genesis wave is due to hit. But that's not the worst of it. The other 2 yachts report similar problems. Only the freighters are going to make it unscathed." "Do we have any options, Captain?" The captain winced. "Yes. We can shed the satellites." Marla gasped. "And kill 700,000 people? Are you insane?" Captain Uzel bristled at that suggestion. "If our ship goes down, they'll die anyway." The Regent scrunched her eyes shut and almost screamed in anguish. 2 million people. I suppose you put out a distress signal? "Oh, yes, some time ago. But who is going to be cruising around out here in the path of the Genesis wave?" Captain Uzel turned to his crew. Make ready to sever tethers and power lines. I'm sorry, Your Regency, but as captain of this ship, I have the authority to do anything it takes to save it. The tactical officer turned to them from his station. Captain, I'm receiving a hail. It's the Dog J, a Klingon vessel. Hope began rising in Marla's breast. Klingon? Put them on screen. When the image blinked on, they saw the fearsome visage of a Klingon warrior.
I am Ambassador Worf, aboard a Klingon vessel, but representing the United Federation of Planets. Do you need assistance?
I am Regent Marla Carew of Aluna, and we've evacuated 8 million people from our planet, but they are stored in the pattern buffers of our transporter satellites. Our main impulse engine is failing, and 2 other ships are in distress.
We have them on our sensors. I have a fleet of 7 warships, and we are at your disposal. We can tow you at warp speed if you can maintain your tractor beams. You will not need to use your engines for propulsion.
Marla Carew lowered her head and sniffed back tears, unable to speak. Captain Uzel stepped to her side. We'll send you coordinates, Ambassador Worf, where our other ships will be waiting for us.
Then leave everything to us. Are you going to return to Aluna after the wave has passed?
Yes, Ambassador.
We will go with you. Worf out.
As soon as the transmission ended, Marla turned to the captain. Get power back to the satellites. Yes, Regent. I always heard that Klingons were rude and unpleasant, but I think they're wonderful. Marla gave a wide grin. Me too. Klingons are beautiful. In the central square of the Summer Palace, thousands of Alunans joined hands, lifted their arms toward the darkening sky, and sang spiritual songs. Even the rioters and those driven insane with fear stopped their pointless destruction of the palace to watch and wait. Parents hugged their children and tried to comfort them. The end was at hand. When the ground trembled, believers raised their voices to the heavens, begging forgiveness and mercy. But neither one was forthcoming. In an instant, the sky turned from blue-black storm clouds into a hellish blaze of vivid purple and green, like a festered wound. A neon green curtain of fire roared across the plains, bearing down on the city. As geysers erupted, the stone and earth liquefied into a churning quagmire that consumed the flailing people and crumbling buildings alike. The planet of Aluna turned into a morass of sludge which throbbed and quaked like a living thing. Abruptly, the subspace video feed from Aluna ended. Worf turned to see his hosts on the Darzor, Regent Carew and Overseer Tajaret, who gripped each other to keep from collapsing. There was certainly nothing he could say to alleviate the horror and helplessness they all felt.
Every power in the Alpha Quadrant is looking for the ones who unleashed this force. We will find them and destroy them.
Overseer Tajaret slumped into an empty seat.
What could possibly be the point of this devastation?
Worf chose his words carefully.
The original Genesis project was a rapid way to terraform a planet. One Starfleet theory is that this wave is designed to prepare a planet for invasion.
Marla Carew gaped at him, her 6 eyebrows arching upward.
Invasion? Are you saying that we're going to have to fight invaders to win back our world? Alunans are not fighters.
Klingons are, Regent. But perhaps you would prefer to relocate.
Overseer Tajaret shook his head.
The only world we've ever known is Aluna. We want to return and rebuild.
Marla clenched her fists in determination.
We'll do more than that. We'll restore Aluna to the way it was.
We happen to be experts at genetics, and we can do our own terraforming. Worf granted her a slight smile.
I was hoping you would say that. I would like to visit one of these Genesis planets and win it back for its rightful inhabitants. We'll soon send probes into your solar system to see what we can learn. I've not yet seen these effects firsthand, but we will see them together. Worf to Captain Kraylank of the Dog J.
Ambassador, I was just about to contact you. We've received a message from Starfleet
saying the source of the Genesis Force has been discovered and neutralized. We don't have any other information, but Starfleet says we should proceed with extreme caution into any areas affected. Captain, send probes into the Alunan solar system. If it is safe, we will proceed as soon as possible. He turned to his hosts. Now I'd best return to my ship. Worf to Dog J. Beam me back to the ship. Marla Carew watched the fearsome-looking Klingon disappear from their bridge, having promised the Lunans to help them return to their homeworld. But she wasn't reassured. The Overseer moved to the bridge station where the Regent was seated and gently touched her shoulder.
Marla, you look so grim. We made it to safety.
I guess I wasn't ready to hear that we would have to fight to reclaim Aluna. Captain Uzel, what is our status?
Impulse engines are maintaining power to the satellites. By the way, one small runabout, the Klamath, says it's urgent that they speak with you. This ship has Federation registry.
Marla rubbed her tired eyes. Did they say what they wanted?
No, but they dropped a name they said you would know. Velo Garlet? Marla sat up.
Velo Garlet? Put the captain of the Klamath on screen.
A few moments later, Marla and everyone else on the bridge was astounded when the pointy-eared countenance of a Vulcan appeared on the view screen. I am Regimal, captain of the Klamath. I must go elsewhere, and I request permission to transfer my 2 passengers to your ship.
Yes, Captain Regimal. Transfer them directly to our bridge. Do you have our coordinates?
I do. Please accept my regrets over the tragic destruction of your planet. Preparing to transport passengers. Live long and prosper. Klamath out.
The first Alunan to materialize on the bridge of the Darzor was Marla's old colleague, Velo Garlet, and she was thrilled to see him. Marla was surprised when the other passenger turned out to be a very young woman wearing a Federation-issued jumpsuit. Who's your friend, Velo?
This is Chandra. She's a very good friend of the new Cirrus consort.
Overseer Tajaret looked at Chandra with interest. Is that so? I haven't even met my new family member yet. The girl stared at him, awed by the presence of the monarch. Can I see my friend, Farlow? He married the Cirrus at the Institute of Devotion. Tajaret pointed toward the ragtag fleet floating in the vastness of space. My wife's shuttlecraft is out there somewhere. We'll have our reunions later. In the meantime, if we could find you a place to sleep... Captain Uzel shook his head.
We have no empty quarters. Marla, who had taken a liking to the young woman, interrupted.
Chandra can stay with me. And Velo, you can stay in the laboratory. We have a whole world to recreate. So let's get started. Worf swung his metal bat'leth and connected hard with the practice weapon of his youthful opponent. His helmeted foe whirled around, ducked, and jabbed him in the ribs. Using every trick to avoid another painful strike, Worf tried to figure out how to counterattack. Sensing victory, his opponent pressed forward, lunging, slashing, and trying to overpower the older fighter. Worf lifted his bat'leth as if to parry again, but instead he pulled it back and stepped aside, allowing his off-balanced opponent to stagger forward. That was when Worf stuck out a big foot and tripped him. Worf swept his weapon like a scythe and connected with the back of the lad's neck. That blow sent him sprawling onto his stomach. Worf yanked off his helmet.
If this was a sharp bat'leth, your head would be bouncing across the deck.
His opponent rolled over and pulled off his own helmet, revealing a shock of blonde hair and a handsome human face. Jeremy Astor laughed as he looked up to his foster father.
I thought I had you that time. You did, but you are too impatient.
Worf reached down and helped the young man to his feet. It's a pain being the only human on this ship. None of the other crew members will fight me. They think it's beneath them. Even my brother won't fight me.
Alexander has much to do lately. They just made him third shift duty officer in engineering, and he's studying our culture and language. But let us go. We must clean up and dress for dinner. Your brother is coming over from the Yavang.
Jeremy sighed. Yeah, well, I'll never get a promotion. I don't think Captain Kraylink likes me.
What did I just tell you about patience? I was the only Klingon on a Starfleet ship, and do you know how many years it took me to get a promotion? But once the promotions started coming, they came rapidly. Now I have such influence that I can demand that both my sons serve with me, and here you are. But I wish this were a happier assignment.
At least Starfleet ended the threat. Teeth clenched, Worf shook his fist.
I wish I had been there to kill the ones who unleashed it.
Jeremy smiled slyly. Dad, you don't really like being an ambassador, do you? Worf looked around and lowered his voice to answer.
No. I would gladly trade places with you and be a junior weapons officer.
Bridge to Ambassador Worf. We have received data from the probes we sent to Aluna. Aluna is still a habitable planet, although the atmosphere is hotter and more humid than before. Plant life has increased oxygen levels in the atmosphere by 20%.
Plant life? I thought the planet had been raised.
This is new plant life, growing at an accelerated pace. Most unusual of all is a reading of 100,000 humanoid-sized life forms that match nothing in our database. Considering the number of life forms, Captain Kraylink wishes to proceed in battle readiness.
Agreed. Inform Regent Carew on the Darzor of these findings, and prepare to get underway.
Yes, sir. Bridge out. Flanked by Overseer Tajaret and Captain Uzel, Marla Carew gazed at the lush green planet on the overhead viewport. It looked perfectly habitable, with its plethora of plant life. But this was a planet none of them recognized. All right, the first order of business is to get the satellites back into their geosynchronous orbits. Then we'll have to erect new transporter stations, lots of them. We can save power by making them unidirectional, down to Aluna only. Tajaret turned to the Regent.
Shouldn't we go there and explore first? We may find that we should relocate.
Marla scoffed at the suggestion. Why should we relocate to another new, untamed planet that isn't our own? Besides, Vilo, tell them what you told me earlier. The other renegade scientist in the group looked up from his readouts. According to Federation data, the closest planet that would be suitable is almost 15 light years away. It would be dangerous to haul the satellites that far. We had better make do with this world. It's the only one we've got. Marla nodded her agreement. We need to commandeer all the shuttlecraft and orbiters. Get technicians on them and begin to put the satellites back into orbit. Hail the Dog Jay and ask them for help. They must have shuttlecraft too. And when the Klingons send an away team down to the planet, I want to be with them. Until then, Vilo and I will be in the laboratory. Cirrus Genoset flushed in anger. What do you mean? They want to commandeer my shuttlecraft. Do they know who I am? The pilot repeated his orders. We're supposed to enter the shuttle bay of the Darzor immediately, and all passengers are supposed to vacate. Genoset stamped her foot.
The impertinence!
Farlow Fuzwick watched his much older wife, thinking that he would like to see her when she wasn't angry and indignant. If he was going to be married to her, at least he wanted to like her a little. While the Cirrus continued to sputter in anger, Podrin gently took her hand. Come on, my dear. You've been dying to get off this craft for 2 days now. Farlow took his seat along with the other passengers, all of whom were trying to avoid the Cirrus. He was still gloomy over losing Kandra and so many of his other friends in the capital city, but it was also thrilling to ride the small ship into the shuttle bay of the royal yacht. Farlow wasn't expecting any kind of welcome, so he was amazed when someone charged out of the waiting crowd and ran toward him. Farlow! He blinked in amazement, because it was a ghost. Kandra? There was nothing ghostly about the hug she gave him. The two young people dashed off ahead of the others, with Condra anxious to tell Farlow her story. I was really mad after I left you, and I almost threw away the brooch and the black tube. It was a good thing I didn't, because they saved my life. I broke into a store. Farlow grinned. I bet you were looking for something to eat. Condra laughed. I was. Hey, why shouldn't I be comfortable if I'm going to die? But there was already a mob of people in there, and they didn't want anyone else there, so they chased me down and cornered me, and I tapped the brooch to save myself. I didn't expect it to work, but it did. A few instants later, I was in a Federation runabout with two men, and they really wanted this. She held up the small ebony tube the two of them had stolen days ago. But this is yours, Farlow. You're the one who really needs it. She pulled her friend into a doorway and cupped her hand to whisper into his ear. You aren't really a high breed. Sniffing this before Padron tested you is what made them think you had all that royal blood. One of the men is a genetic scientist named Velo Garlet. He's on this ship, and he made this device in order to fool their DNA sensors, and it works. She pressed the small cylinder into his hand. Velo Garlet promised me that he would keep your secret from everyone because the Genesis wave made his plans pointless. We both owe our lives to this little black tube. Farlow carefully hid the tube in the inner breast pocket of his fine silky tunic. Thanks, Condra. You're the best friend anybody ever had. In his quarters on the Dog J, Worf listened to the young Klingon on the view screen with some amusement. His biological son, Alexander Rozhenko, was slightly built for a Klingon, but he had a presence and outspokenness that belied his youth. I warn you, Father, I wouldn't use the transporters to go down there. There's too much residual radiation from protomatter fission and thermonuclear reaction, and our biofilters may not be familiar with any of the microbes. I say we take a shuttlecraft down.
We? Are you coming on the away team with us?
I thought I would. You'll need somebody on tricorder.
The ambassador frowned in thought. The Regent is not going to be happy to hear that we can't use transporters, because she wants to get her people out of those pattern buffers.
I know, Father, but it's not safe yet. Perhaps by the time we return all the satellites to orbit, it will be. So, when do we go down to Aluna?
After we run more scans. I'll inform you and your captain when it's time to go.
Very well, Father. Rozhenko out.
As Alexander's image faded, the big Klingon sat back in his seat and smiled. Worf relished these days with his sons, no matter how fraught with danger they were. He was cautious enough to make sure that the majority of the crew on the landing party to Aluna would be warriors, armed to the teeth, and he was taking no chances with his two sons and various Alunan dignitaries who were along for the ride. But he felt an ominous dread that things wouldn't go smoothly. About 2 hours later, in the Royal Yacht's laboratory, Marla Carew was monitoring the status of the Alunan satellites when she was interrupted by Complum.
Your Regency, Ambassador Worf is insisting that we must load the shuttlecraft now. I've already informed Overseer Tijaret.
The Regent scowled. Why can't we use transporters?
Radiation, protomatter, microbes, general caution. The short answer is that the Klingons want to land in a shuttlecraft. They'll have more firepower if they need it.
Very well. I'm on my way. Marla Carew had lived long enough to see many storms and bouts of bad weather on her native Aluna, but she never expected to see anything like the tempest currently lashing this part of the planet. Even 3 of the largest Klingon shuttlecraft were buffeted mercilessly as they tried to land. Every flat part of the planet was covered with teeming, churning plant life, much of it towering into the air. The sky was a swirling morass of dust, sleet, purple-orange clouds, and the wind was ferocious, whipping at the new flora like a hurricane. Volcanoes belched ash and fire in the distance, and huge geysers spewed brackish water 80 meters into the air, forcing all 3 shuttles to circle slowly, looking for a place to set down. Marla turned to Ambassador Worf. Isn't there someplace more hospitable to land? Our sensors haven't found such a place. Pilot, you and the other shuttles blast out a landing pad.
All three vessels aligned themselves and selected an overgrown stand of gnarled trees. Debris swirled into the turbulent sky until they finally scorched a huge red welt on the planet's surface. Marla held her breath and gripped the arms of her chair as their shuttlecraft dropped into the riotous jungle. After they landed, 3 heavily armed Klingon security officers took positions at the hatch, planning to be the first ones out. The rest of the party on the shuttle consisted of Worf, his 2 young aides, Jeremy and Alexander, plus Marla Carew and Overseer Tijaret. The Overseer looked ashen with fright as he stared out the viewport at an incredible jungle of freakish new life. Ferns and evergreen-like plants grew in abundance, unfurling long pistils in colorful red blooms. Misshapen trees towered above them. The Overseer announced to Worf,
I will walk on Aluna. Open the hatch.
Wretched odors of ammonia, sulfur, charred vegetation, and rotting decay rolled into the tiny craft, and Marla nearly gagged. Tijaret gripped her hand for both physical and moral support. By the time the 2 Alunans reached the hatch, the Klingons had formed a circle of protection around the landing party. Upon leaping out, Marla's feet sunk into the charred mire, and she was nearly knocked to the ground by the furious wind. Putrid fog and slimy sleet rolled over them in waves. Marla gasped in alarm because the ground was crawling with wormy, fishy slugs which had somehow survived the disruptor blasts. Alexander took readings with his tricorder and reported to Worf.
Maybe this accelerated growth will slow down, but it hasn't yet. The residual protomatter is creating havoc with the sensors.
The blonde Jeremy, hefting his disruptor rifle, scanned the swaying treetops, which seemed to be covered with blankets of hanging moss.
Sheesh, this is nasty.
Marla turned to the Klingons. Ambassador, we need a place to erect our transporter booths. The transporters in the satellites can't direct beam just anywhere. They have to be targeted and activated by booths on the ground. Worf shook some slimy creatures off his boot and gave an order.
First, we set up a base. Alexander, what about the big life forms the probes detected?
The young Klingon studied his tricorder.
They're all around us, mostly in the trees, but they could be parasitic plants.
Overseer Tijaret staggered on his feet.
I need to go back to the shuttlecraft.
Marla nodded her encouragement. Go ahead. I'll let you know if we find anything of interest. Ambassador Worf, what about shelters? The Klingon ordered half of his 20 security officers to start the process of taking back the planet for humanoid habitation. In due time, the Klingon warriors managed to construct a small geodesic dome which kept trying to blow away. Despite the futility of their efforts, Marla was heartened by the sight of the first new building on their ravaged homeworld, and she returned to the shuttlecraft. Soon, Ambassador Worf entered, shaking snow off his hair and shoulders, and he was followed by the young blonde man he called Jeremy, who sat at the pilot's console.
Overseer, Regent, we need to contact our ships and blast out a bigger clearing for our base. Do you have any objections?
Marla didn't. Diffidently, Tijaret waved his approval.
Blast the whole planet.
Marla's jaw clenched tightly at those words, and she turned to the Overseer. It's up to us to save our world. Alexander Rozhenko covered his ears as explosions ripped the riotous jungle 1 kilometer away, sending great plumes of smoke and plant debris swirling into the atmosphere. From space, the Klingon task force continued to pound the selected campsite spot with disruptor beams, obliterating the profuse vegetation. Alexander wondered to himself why an invader would terraform a planet that was already livable. Where were those who could make use of such a wretched, overgrown wilderness? A shout wrenched him out of his uneasy thoughts. One of the guards at the edge of the clearing drew a hand disruptor. As the guard began firing into the brush, Alexander jumped to his feet and jogged toward the spot, as did his father and foster brother Jeremy. Worf barked at the guard.
Cease fire! What did you see?
Creatures!
They used their batlets and knives to slash at the underbrush, revealing a nest of grotesque, man-sized slugs. For mouths, they seemed to have circles ringed with tiny teeth. Worf ordered them to capture one and kill the rest.
These may be the life forms that have registered on our sensors.
Alexander and Jeremy volunteered and reached into the squirming, twisting mass of slime and grabbed the fattest specimen. The two boys finally wrestled it onto bare ground and tied cords around its head as it snapped and twisted and lunged at them. Worf laughed.
Well done. I wonder if these things are good eating.
Jeremy smiled. I bet it would be good with a little drawn garlic butter. The old warrior who had started this ruckus snarled at them.
That's not what I saw.
The two boys dragged the slimy creature over the charred dirt and tossed it unceremoniously into the small shuttlecraft. Worf activated a comm channel.
Captain Kraylank, I'm sure you have cleared enough land for our base.
Will you be spending the night on the planet, Ambassador?
I believe we must. There is a certain amount of exploration to be done here before we can allow the Illuminans to return. Shuttlecraft 5 will soon start to the Dog J for supplies.
Ambassador, I will also send a landing party to Base 2 to start erecting shelters.
Wait until morning, Captain. It's starting to get dark here. With the added supplies, we'll be fine for the night.
Alexander looked up to see a shuttlecraft streaking over the treetops as it departed with the Illunan regent and overseer. His father, Jeremy, and the remaining warriors were making a slow walk around the perimeter. Even though the wind continued to howl and the temperature grew colder, the sunset gave the swaying trees and rugged mountains a golden glow that made them beautiful in a primitive fashion. Alexander couldn't imagine the kind of creature who would find this place to be a custom-built paradise, but gazing at the sheer force of life in this place made a person feel alive. Suddenly, he heard a soft, feminine voice calling to him from the unruly jungle.
Alexander, I am here.
He whirled around and thought he saw a figure, somewhat obscured by the lengthening shadows of dusk. As she strode toward him, the vines and thorn bushes seemed to part, and Alexander recognized her long hair, beautiful face, and prominent head ridges. Again he heard her soothing voice in his mind.
Alexander, it's so good to see you again.
Mother! He could hardly believe his eyes. He hadn't seen Kalair since he was a lad. Then something in his mind snapped. Kalair was dead.
Come with me, Alexander.
She held out her hand. More than anything in the universe, he wanted to grab that hand, even as the logic centers of his brain screamed out that this couldn't be real. Startled, he turned to see two officers shooting something in the brush just off to his right. That broke the spell. He turned to look for his mother, but she was gone, consumed by the shadows that were gradually swallowing the great forest. His foster brother Jeremy ran over to him. I hardly ever see Klingons look pale, but you look pale, Alexander. Did you see her? She was just out there, in the forest. I was just thinking about her, and there she was. He shook his head, feeling as if he had just awakened from a dream. Jeremy, where's Father? Jeremy pointed to one of the shelters, and the young Klingon jogged in that direction. He entered the geodesic dome and found Worf entering data onto a pad.
What is it, son?
Come with me, please. It's urgent. Worf set down his pad. Seeing the wild look in his son's eyes, he picked up his batleth on the way out. They strode to the edge of the forest where Jeremy was still standing. Now it was Alexander's turn to be shocked at the human's appearance. I saw her! She was out there! My mother! As soon as Jeremy said the words, he shook his head in confusion, realizing that couldn't be true. Alexander gripped his father's forearm. Father, think about my mother, Kalair, and call to her. Frowning deeply at such nonsense, Worf nevertheless did as he'd been told.
Kalair? Kalair?
Man-sized shapes began to emerge from the forest, moving toward them in a ghostly procession. One of them was Kalair, another was Jeremy's mother. Worf was thunderstruck.
By the beard of Kalis, it is her! Your mother!
To the right of them, Alexander saw a Klingon security officer drop to his knees before one of the wispy figures emerging from the fog and call out the name of Gowron, a dead Klingon leader. Everywhere Alexander looked, he saw his mother. Dozens of them, all smiling beatifically. Kalair held out her arms to Worf.
Come with me. We are waiting for you.
Alexander grabbed his father's arm, trying to drag him away from the shadowy, ghost-filled jungle of Aluna.
We've got to get out of here. Something is affecting our minds.
When Worf refused to move, Alexander clenched his fist and slugged him in the jaw. The big Klingon nearly dropped to the ground, but the blow shattered the hold that the apparition had on him. He shouted,
Everyone to the shuttlecraft! Immediate evacuation! Everyone to the shuttles!
But many of the officers were entranced by the ghost-like beings emerging from the forest. In desperation, Worf ran up to one of the creatures and cut it in half with his battle. What fell to the ground was a weird clump of moss and gray-green vegetation. The enraged Klingon, whose dear one had just been dispatched with such cold-blooded ruthlessness, turned on Worf and drew his knife. Jeremy leveled a Starfleet phaser. Stunned, the officer slumped to the ground, unconscious.
Everyone to the shuttlecraft, now!
Those who were too enchanted to obey orders were stunned into unconsciousness by Jeremy's phaser. Dragging, cajoling, yelling, and slugging it out with each other, the small force of Klingons and one human somehow retreated into the two shuttlecraft. As they rose over the dense forest of Aluna, Worf contacted the Dog J.
Captain Kralenk, we were under attack by creatures which could assume the appearance of people we know. Loved ones who are dead or certainly not on Aluna. We are returning to the ship, but I request quarantine measures.
Very well, Ambassador. We'll turn on the force fields in the shuttle bay, and I'll have a medical team meet you. Worf, are you saying that the planet is inhabited? Worf frowned.
Let us just say that something lives here, besides trees, bushes, and slugs.
On the bridge of the royal yacht Darzor, Marla Carew paced angrily, slamming her fist into her palm. This is an absurd directive from the Klingons. We still cannot transport down to Aluna. Why not? Unless we can transport to the planet, 8 million survivors are in jeopardy. She turned to Captain Uzel. Now that most of the satellites have been disconnected from our engines, do we have enough power to use our transporters?
Very sparingly. And what do you have in mind, Regent?
I want to prove our Klingon friends wrong. I'm going to go to the transporter room and beam down to the planet. Tell them I am coming. Marla smelled the awful ammonia and sulfur-tainted air, then shivered from the cold. She looked at the two domed shelters, the only things which stood out in the Alunan night, and she wondered what the Klingons' rush to evacuate had been. The distant mountains were tipped with fire from volcanic eruptions, but the wind had died down along with some of the more malevolent plant growth. There was almost a peace here now that gave her hope that they could resettle Aluna and make it their home once again. Hearing an odd shuffling noise behind her, she turned around and saw a slight bent figure walking toward her.
Hello, Regent.
Marla gasped and stumbled backward a few paces.
Curate Molevson! Yes, I am here, even though you tried to kill me.
Marla shook her head with disbelief.
It's really you! I have friends. Friends who spared my life and made sure I could be here to greet you upon your return. I want you to know that I bear you no ill feelings. I am proud of you for fulfilling your vision and saving so many. I have revealed myself to you because I want you to know that it is safe for our people to return to Aluna.
Don't worry, Curate. I will make sure all the survivors return. But now I must go back to the ship, and you should come with me.
No, you are not the only one who thinks I am dead. And it's best for you to keep our secret for now.
He held out his wizened hand, and Marla dropped to her knees and gratefully kissed it. Marla thought she saw other figures moving in the dark forest. "You are not alone, Curate?"
Never am I alone. All of this will be revealed in time. But beware of the Klingons. I don't trust them. Now you may return to the ship.
"Yes, Curate." Bowing gratefully, Marla Carew pressed a button on her wristband, and her molecules swirled upward in a shimmering column of refracted light. Worf paced sullenly in the confines of the brig on the Dog J, where he, Alexander, Jeremy, and the other members of the landing party had been direct beamed from the shuttle bay. Jeremy smiled in sympathy. "Dad, all that pacing isn't going to get us out of here any sooner. It's something which affected all of us, like mass hysteria." Worf stopped pacing and scowled at his adopted son.
Klingons do not get hysterical.
But one by one, all the hardened Klingon warriors in the brig admitted to seeing loved ones or important figures from their past, some of whom were dead, and all of whom could not possibly be on Aluna. As the outer door opened, the squat, gray-haired Captain Kralank entered, followed by an elderly white-haired doctor named Maloric. The old doctor cleared his throat and consulted a medical pad.
All of you are suffering from a fungal infection in your brains and lungs. This fungus does not appear to be fatal, although it is fast-moving and airborne, making it very contagious. Fungi of this sort can cause fevers and hallucination, but it is treatable.
Worf bristled.
These were not hallucinations.
Maloric nodded sagely.
An airborne fungus could transmit information, perhaps even allow another creature to read your mind if it were close enough. You were probably infected in the first hours on the planet's surface. The captain has more information. Starfleet should have warned us what we were dealing with. I have found this was not an isolated incident. Both Starfleet and Romulan forces have experienced similar encounters. They promised to send some help soon. As yet, there's no set procedure for dealing with these ghosts, so we can proceed as we see fit.
Worf's eyes flashed with anger.
I see fit to eradicate them. Until we do, we should wear protective suits to minimize exposure to the fungus. And make sure we keep the Alunans from going down there.
Captain Kralank scowled. That may be easier said than done. I've sent them directives, but they keep demanding that they be allowed to erect transporter booths so they can start freeing their people from the pattern buffers. Dr. Maloric addressed Worf.
My staff will be here soon with an antibiotic, which should work. So rest and resign yourselves to an indefinite stay in the brig.
Alexander stepped forward.
Captain, what about that slug-like creature we sent you? Relatively harmless, although it was also infected by the fungus and a related parasite. Our science officer considers it to be a food source.
Worf looked askance at the captain.
A food source for what other kind of creature?
They all looked at one another, but nobody ventured a reply. Feeling energized after her visit to the planet, Marla Carew walked into the dimly lit laboratory on the Darzor, where her master scientist, Velo Garlett, was at work on a prototype transporter booth. Despite feeling better about their prospects since seeing Curate Molovzon again, Marla had no doubt that their time to act was running out. She looked at Velo's apparatus with admiration. Good work. Does it meet all of my specs? Yes. As you requested, it has a chromosynthesis emitter hidden in the base, which we can program and activate remotely. Without a considerable amount of testing, however, I'm not quite sure what chromosynthesis will do to the current flora and fauna on the planet. We may not need it, Velo, because this new world may yet prove to be hospitable. Still, I would like to have the option to terraform if necessary. Without informing the Klingons, Regent? Marla scowled. It's our planet, and we can do what we want with it. Admiral Alina Nechayev sat at the dining table in her stateroom aboard the starship Sovereign. It had been several hours since she had left the Enterprise crew on Starbase 302, and it seemed as if the worst should be over. But the mountain of requests on this table made it clear that the repercussions of the Genesis wave would continue for some time. Already she had dispatched a special operative, Regimal, to investigate the existence of a portable Genesis device. Now, reports were coming in from all over that the Moss creatures were flourishing on several of the planets the Genesis wave had transformed. It seemed inevitable that there would be a second round of wholesale destruction and murder, except on one previously uninhabited planet where the Moss creatures would be allowed to exist. Nechayev had asked another passenger on the Sovereign, Dr. Leah Brahms, to issue a report to all the survivors of all the worlds affected by the Genesis wave. Nobody knew more about the wave and its horrible aftermath than Leah Brahms, who had rushed halfway across the Alpha Quadrant trying to warn people. Leah had been left somewhat traumatized by her husband's death and all that she had witnessed, but she was a strong woman, and Nechayev had never been averse to using people under difficult circumstances. The attractive but somewhat gaunt figure of Leah Brahms entered her quarters.
"You sent for me, Admiral?" "Yes, Leah. Please have a seat."
Nechayev motioned to the piles of documents before her. "As you can see, we still got a ton of work to do. Most of these are dispatches from Genesis planets where there are concerned survivors. This one's about a planet named Aluna, which was hit late in the wave cycle. Why don't you read it, while I catch up on some of these others?" She handed the pad to Leah Brahms. From her furrowed brow, it was clear that Leah found the report fascinating.
"Amazing, Admiral. All those people trapped in transporter buffers. I can think of a million things that could go wrong, especially if they're trying to return these people to a new Genesis planet." "You're right, Leah. The Klingons there can handle the Moss creatures, but I believe the Alunans could use some technical help."
Leah narrowed her eyes.
"Like me? You're all I have. This ship is returning to Earth, but we'll pass fairly close to Aluna. I'd be honored if you would join my team. What do you say, Dr. Brahms?" "I'll go to Aluna."
The Admiral gave Leah a broad smile and offered the younger woman her hand.
"Welcome aboard."
Farlow Fuzwick squirmed uncomfortably in his seat as he sat in the presence of Overseer Tejaret, Cirrus Geneset, and his fellow Cirrus consort, Padron. He had wanted to bring Chandra with him to this private dinner in the royal stateroom, but Geneset had insisted, with steely resolve, that this was a dinner for members of the royal family only. After dessert, Cirrus Geneset sat up stiffly in her chair. "I suggested we have dinner together for a reason. I want to discuss when and how we should go about returning the traditional power of government to the royal family. The people will be helped by a sense of tradition and continuity with our past." Padron nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. It will encourage them when they step off our transporters to see the power structure they have come to trust." Overseer Tejaret sniffed disdainfully.
"What do you want to do with Marla Carew? Simply toss her off with a handshake?" "Husband, may I remind you that not long ago, Marla Carew was convicted of heresy. She should be grateful for the pardon you granted her. I'm sure we will find a way to dutifully honor Marla Carew. However, leaving her permanently in charge of Aluna is pointless. Tejaret, you made her the regent, and you could return power to its rightful place whenever you wish. I urge you to do so immediately." Farlow and everyone else in the room turned to look at the Overseer, who shifted uneasily under their gaze. "We still need Marla Carew as long as our people are trapped in those satellites. As soon as they are freed, I will review this decision. Now I am tired. If you would leave me, I'd like to go to bed." Geneset smiled at him. "Let me rub your back. That will ease your tension." She looked pointedly at Padron and Farlow. As Uncle Padron hustled him out of the royal stateroom, Farlow breathed a sigh of relief. This would apparently be another night when he would not be required to perform any consort duties.
He felt for the ebony tube in his pocket to make sure he still had it. Until he and Chandra were back on Aluna, and life was less uncertain, he had to remain a hybrid. In the brig of the Dog J, a security officer turned off the force field.
Ambassador Worf, you and all the members of the landing party are free to go. The doctor says the treatment worked and you are cleared. The captain is assembling a squadron of warriors to return to the planet and secure Base 2. If any of you wish to participate, report to the shuttle bay at 1000 hours.
Jeremy grinned. Good! That gives us time to eat. Worf turned to Alexander, who was not the most avid fighter.
Perhaps you would prefer to return to your ship.
No thanks, Father. Worf allowed himself a smile.
Madachach.
Later, from the moment their shuttlecraft landed roughly in an overgrown crater, which had been cleared of vegetation only yesterday, Alexander Rozhenko knew they were in for a difficult fight. Through the blurry, leaf-streaked window, he could see 4 of the other 10 shuttlecraft plunked down in the 3 hectares supposedly cleared by yesterday's bombardment. Monstrous beings shuffled from the jungle and marched toward them en masse, shifting into recognizable shapes as they came. Unable to read their minds, the bizarre creatures took on the forms of the few humanoids they had learned about the night before. Alexander recoiled in horror as his dead mother suddenly peered at him through the window. Worf shouted his final orders before they disembarked.
Remember, take no prisoners. Kill everything that moves, unless they are wearing one of our suits. Daleg wa'i hach.
As Worf pushed the hatch open, he was instantly encircled by thorny green tendrils and the naked arms of fake K-Lairs. He was pulled from the craft and engulfed, but Jeremy was right behind him. The young human blasted the leafy heads of the enemy, and a blazing fire erupted in the hatchway. Every centimeter of ground was fought over. Dozens of brave warriors were pulled to the ground, and some had their helmets and suits ripped from their bodies. Alexander was one of those who carried a Starfleet phaser set to stun, and it was his job to incapacitate those who might be infected and used by the enemy. Because the fire and smoke was aiding the enemy and hindering the Klingon advance, Worf called to his comrades.
Switch to batlets.
The enemy realized that this was the first but most important battle. If the suited invaders could be stopped here, the world of Aluna was theirs forever. Even some of the man-sized slugs got into the fight, snaking their way through the morass to latch onto legs and fallen comrades. Alexander used his phaser to stun more than one comrade who was dying. Someone started lobbing explosive shells behind the enemy lines to reduce their incredible number of reinforcements. The explosions set the whole forest on fire, and they were soon fighting inside a ring of flames. Smoke wafted across the battlefield, and so did the howls of many Klingons as they performed the death ritual over their fallen comrades. Manning a tricorder to check for vital signs, Alexander ran from one wounded fighter to another. He tagged those still alive with a comm medallion.
Father, where are you? Over here, Alexander.
Alexander's heart sank when he saw Worf bent over a fallen figure, one considerably skinnier than the brawny Klingons. Jeremy was not moving, and his suit was badly burned.
Is Jeremy alive, Father? Barely.
Alexander placed his last comm medallion on the chest of his human brother.
Father, despite the directive against transporting, we've got many wounded who need to get back to the ship immediately. Can you give the order?
Worf nodded.
Worf to Captain Kraylank on the Dog J. We have won a great victory, killing countless hundreds of these monsters. But we have many dead and wounded. I request permission to have the badly wounded beamed to the ship. My son has tagged them with comm devices. Certainly, Ambassador. Tonight we will sing your praises over a goblet of blood wine. Kraylank, out.
Worf staggered to his feet and put his arm around his son.
I hope the Alunans appreciate what we are doing for them. Join me in the death howl, the same as we did for your mother. Alexander nodded solemnly, and he and his father threw their heads back and bellowed their grief and pride to the dusky, smoke-filled sky.